How are we doing there, boys and girls? Manthieus here. Welcome back to another video. So we're going to take a little bit of a look at Inscription now, continuing on our series of sort of first view, first impressions of the professions. It's taken me a little while to get to Inscription because quite recently on the beta it was completely balked, completely broken. I now feel it's in sort of semi-testable state at the very least. There's still a few hiccups which we might point out along the route, but for the most part it's implemented and we can at least test it now. Conceptually, Inscription is pretty much the same. We're going to be taking herbs. We're going to be milling those herbs down to make some pigments. We're going to take those pigments and we're going to turn those pigments into inks. And then we can progress further in the profession. I suppose we should start with the big changes because these are the sort of the highlight things. These are the things people are going to want to know about quickly. Dark Moon cards. Let's address the Dark Moon card, the elephant in the room. Scribes don't make Dark Moon cards anymore. We are not responsible for crafting Dark Moon cards. We can do dealings with Dark Moon cards, but we are not responsible for crafting these trinkets ourselves. The cards, the ace through till 8, are likely to be world drop items, and this means we can jump into the Spec Trees just very quickly. They're likely to be world drop items, the ace through till 8, and if you dive deep into the Spec Trees, there's a section that highlights that there is an increased ability to find Dark Moon cards by 50%. And this is represented on all 4 of the different Dark Moon varieties. Theoretically meaning there's up to a 200% chance for a scribe to find Dark Moon cards out in the wild. It is yet to be decided whether you actually need to be a scribe to find them in the first place, or whether they're just not implemented yet on the actual testing servers, or whether everybody can find them but scribes have an increased chance. At this point we don't know. But it's an interesting twist to Inscription. This is going to be the first expansion, I think ever, where we are not going to be crafting the Dark Moon cards ourselves. Weirdly, interestingly, you can also acquire them via fishing. The last couple of beta builds have nerfed this quite heavily though, so I'm not sure if it's going to be the optimal way to gain them via fishing, or whether, I don't know, doing some mob killing, doing some farming, doing some questing might be the way to get these if you happen to spec in that direction. Other than that, we are doing the same sort of things. We do make our missives. We make a bunch of regular missives. We are also responsible for the profession-style missives as well once we unlock those. We, once again, are going to be making the knowledge point books. These were a very, very popular way for scribes to basically never not have a work order to fill. Especially at the beginning of Dragonflight when everybody was running around frantically to level up half the professions. Same concept here again. You can craft the books. This is on a discovery system, meaning you'll first be able to spec into getting your Inscription book for yourself. And the more times you craft this for others, you can notice that it's bind on pickup, so you have to craft it for others via the work order system. The more times you craft this, the more chances you have of discovering the other ones for the other professions. It might be required. This is broken on the beta at the moment. I've crafted a bunch of these, never got one to proc. But the chances are you will start off with your Inscription one, make yourself a few, and in the process hopefully find some of the other professions and then can start running around filling orders left, right and centre. Leveling Inscription was one thing I will say feedback-wise initially. If you jump onto the beta and test this yourself, I really do hope that this changes between now and the expansion going live, is that the amount of herbs you need to make inks is absolutely ludicrous. I think in testing, to get up to about skill 80 you can get to with just trainer recipes. We went through quite literally thousands of herbs, nearly 3,000 herbs, and we're not talking just the Myco Bloom. Myco Bloom is likely to be your common, if you've played Dragonflight, equivalent of Bloom. Like, this is going to be your common herb, but we went through a couple of thousand of this quite easily in leveling, plus we needed to use a whole bunch of lure drops, Orbinids, and even Blessing Blossoms, which are the uncommon herbs as well. This could put quite a drain. I think they need to consider the amount of materials that are needed for the process of taking herbs into pigments, pigments into inks, as it's quite it's quite heavy right now. It's quite heavy, to say the least. It's also quite slow at the beginning, but you do get the luxury of, once you've done it a little bit, if we go back into the milling, we can quickly simulate this. You'll see there's a buff that pops up at the top. You can spec into a stacking speed increase. You'll see here the speed is just stacking, stacking, stacking. You can stack it up to a 60% crafting speed, at least as it stands right now. 60% crafting speed does mean that eventually you'll be able to blast through it. But until you've specced into it, it's tediously slow. This does work. This works on both crafting inks as well. We look at now crafting some inks. The first time we do it, it's very slow. We have a separate improved ink buff that's going to increase the crafting speed each and every time. This comes through your spec trees. You can spec into this. You can see it slowly increases, 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 and I think this one also caps out at 60% crafting speed as well. So if you're going to do some mass crafting, you can do it a little bit faster. Should we talk about the spec trees in a little bit more detail? That's really the basics to point out. In fact, before we jump into the spec trees, I want to just highlight the contracts real quickly. Contracts were a thing again. The difference with the contracts this time is they appear to be warbound, meaning you are not going to be crafting these to sell them, or at least not in the traditional fashion. These are not going to be going on the auction house. You might need to be looking at filling work orders for your contracts. Another thing that's going into the crafting order system, you can see you can order the contracts from here. And at least one of them, I can't remember which one it was, one of them was indicating that it was a... Yeah, here we go. See, the Assembly of the Deeps. This one's indicating that it's binds to warband until equipped. Meaning if you're crafting these, you're unlikely to be selling them, meaning that you might only be able to get your contract through work orders again. A little bit of further testing on this is needed to determine if that is the way that it's going. But yeah, once again, we'll see. We'll see. Let's talk about the spec trees then, if you want to play with Inscription in a little bit more detail. The spec trees are pretty easy, pretty straightforward actually. Your main first tree, Pursuit of Knowledge, is going to be a very general tree. This is just for if you want to stack up those secondary crafting stats. You have a node specifically for multi-crafting. You have a node specifically for resourcefulness. You have a node specifically for ingenuity. The main one gives you a little bit of all three. Pursuit of Perfection is likely the route I will probably take, because this is the one that improves your skill at milling. It improves your skill at making the inks, and it ultimately improves your skill at making the intermediate reagents that you'll be able to sell on the auction house. It's the very final nodes in these trees that are going to give you that crafting speed buff we took a little bit of a look at a minute ago. 2% crafting speed for 30 seconds, stacking up to 15 times. 15 times 2 is only 30. Not sure why it gave us a 60% speed buff. It's beta. Things are still a little bit, things have still got to be finished. Careful Carvings is your tree where you're going to focus on making some of the weapons. We are still, as scribes, responsible for the two-handed staves, both the agility and the intellect type. You can fully specialize into these, and there's also the offhand torch as well. In leveling, you are almost forced, if you want to get 100 skill in Inscription, to at least put some points in here, which I'm hoping is something that they're going to change, because if you are a player like me that might focus on more region-wide auction house stuff, it's going to feel a little bit odd having to put some points in just to get these final points up here. That's maybe a balancing thing. The right-hand side of this tree, the Careful Carvings tree, is where we're going to focus on the profession tools for other people. We as scribes don't make many profession tools, but the ones that we do look quite important. The first one's the chef's rolling pin. This is your cooking profession tool. We've already taken a little bit of a look at cooking, and we've deemed that cooking is going to be quite useful for everybody out there if they want to have food buffs that persist through death. Meaning there could be quite an increased amount of demand for the profession tool for cooking. There is also the Alchemist's Mixing Rod. We already are led to believe that alchemists are going to be coming out in full force. The alt armies looking to craft blasphemites. That means there could be an awful lot of alchemists out there, so speccing into making these effectively could end up being quite lucrative for you. And we as scribes make our own profession tool, the Scribe's Quill. If you choose to spec in this direction, expect to be able to supply other scribes their quills, as well as keeping yours up in sort of quality. You want a quality 5 one of these eventually. And maybe even multiple of them. If you want to spec multicraft for one, resourcefulness for another, this is quite a common thing to do. The final tree is the Archival Additions tree. This is where we have the Dark Moon card side of things. To elaborate a little bit more on Dark Moon cards, I know we talked earlier about how we acquire the ace through till 8. There's an interesting twist with Dark Moon cards. Even though we don't craft them, we are able to take the Dark Moon card and make Dark Moon sigils of each variation. What this fundamentally does is it extracts the Dark Moon cards proc, the equip bonus. Ultimately, the reason why most people want the trinkets in the first place. It extracts that and converts it into an optional crafting reagent, or an embellishment as most people call them. Meaning you can then go and slap this on any piece of gear that you want. If these end up being powerful enough that they are on people's BIS lists for embellishments, this could be quite a lucrative little side of Inscription. But it is still weird for me. It's still kind of, it doesn't sit quite right with me that we don't craft the cards. It was a bit of a false hope in Dragonflight. A lot of people lost a lot of gold crafting Dark Moon cards in Dragonflight, considering you could then go and fish the damn things. That screwed over a lot of people. So maybe having scribes not craft them at all this time around is a safer option. This is a way for scribes to at least care about Dark Moon cards somewhat. And then the final side of this tree is your everything else section. This is where you're going to be able to spec in and become better at crafting those contracts. You're going to have access to and be better at crafting all of the missives. And of course, finally, your Vantus runes for your increased kill chance in the raid. So that's really Inscription in a nutshell. There's not too much more to say about it. It's a profession that still needs a little bit of work. There's a few things that are clearly broken, not balanced, not finished yet. But for the most part, it is what we expect Inscription to do. I'm kind of hoping that taking the Dark Moon deck crafting away from it isn't going to hurt the profession too much overall. I know there's a lot of people, I especially, have also made a vast amount of gold at the beginning of nearly every past expansion, crafting and selling Dark Moon cards. Some people might feel a little bit lost at the beginning of the new expansion, if that's not an option, but there's some other stuff to keep you busy all the same. So I'll leave it there, boys and girls. If you've got your questions about Inscription, drop them down in the comment section down below. You can always come say hi and hang out in the Discord. There's plenty of smart people over there that can answer any questions about the professions if you do not have access to beta yourself to have a little bit of a poke around. But I'll leave it there for today. Give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Consider subscribing if you're new around here. And I'll see you all next time. Peace.